So I've been kind of procrastinating on this Vagrant video for a while, and that's because Vagrant itself is kind of a weird abstract thing. And if you've never used it before, or you've never even heard of it before, watching a video on it isn't really a great way to get started. And unfortunately, really the best way of getting started that I've found is to just dive into Vagrant and start using it. But without knowing what it is, that makes it kind of difficult. So I will try to explain the absolute basics of Vagrant and why it's important and kind of how to use it. So Vagrant is a sort of utility that helps you provision and manage virtual machines. Vagrant works with a lot of different hypervisors, from Virtualbox, which is the default, to VMware, to Hyper-V, and I think that there are actually some others, but there always has to be some sort of hypervisor. Now, a lot of people get Vagrant and something like Docker confused, but these are totally different things. Vagrant is for managing actual virtual machines for development environments and things. Docker is for managing containers. Docker itself, I believe, is a hypervisor, but it's different. Containers themselves are different in nature. Vagrant manages development environments, and I guess you could use them for really anything that you could use a hypervisor for, but that's specifically what it's meant for. The management and provisioning of virtualized environments, not containers. You can run containers in your virtualized environments, but these are two totally different things and should not be confused. So very quickly, why do you want to use Vagrant? So if you're just an end user or desktop user, you probably would never want to use Vagrant. I guess you could if you really like doing Linux distro reviews, then it might be easier to set up and provision a Linux. I mean, this is like a really, really fringy edge case, and I don't recommend using Vagrant. I mean, that'd be a really, really weird case. But for an enterprise, like the place where I work, all of our development environments are virtualized. We have a laptop that is a workstation, but we don't really develop any code on that workstation. We used to, but we switched to this different model where we use virtualized environments. So we can have 3 different virtual machines in 3 totally different states. And if one gets in a bad state or does something weird, we can just burn that down and spin up a new one in 30 seconds, and pow, we're back to where we were at square one, where we have all of our stuff installed and we're ready to start coding. So that seems to be kind of a new standard, especially for more, I guess, cutting edge shops. And if you still don't really understand Vagrant or why you can use it, you're about to see just how easy it is to get started and set up with Vagrant. So Vagrant itself is, of course, an application. And I'm running Ubuntu 16.04 LTS, and it comes no surprise that Vagrant is, of course, in the package repositories. So it says right here, Vagrant is in fact a tool for building and distributing virtualized development environments. So you'll need to just go ahead and pull down Vagrant, and honestly I can't remember if Virtualbox is a hard dependency, but Virtualbox itself is the default provider for Vagrant. So unless you have something like VMware installed, which you probably don't, you'll want to go ahead and install Virtualbox. And you'll need both I believe that you need both the Virtualbox and the DKMS, but for sure you will definitely need Virtualbox. So go ahead and pull these guys down. And once you have Vagrant and Virtualbox installed, you can jump over here and check out the Atlas. Now, one of the super cool things that the HashiCorp company, the company that makes Vagrant, provides is this Atlas, or I guess this index of Vagrant boxes that people from the community can upload for everyone else to use. You can see at the very top we have Ubuntu Trusty 64, 22 million downloads. And then going down the list, we have Ubuntu Trusty 32 at 1.4 million. And then we have you could see that Ubuntu is like the standard development image. We have some other ones like CoreOS is in here, I think. CentOS is in the main list. So you can search for a lot of different things. I mean, we have Arch in here. Of course we have Arch in here. Do we have something like a Gentoo or something? We do have a Gentoo. Do we have Windows? Wouldn't you know it, there is a Windows. I'm not really sure how the licensing on this would work. I'm not going to delve into that. Let's just go ahead and go back to the index. So what does this index mean to you? Well, we're about to find out. I have this folder, And you can see that I have a folder called Manjaro in here. And if I open up VirtualBox, I have Manjaro here. So if I go into this folder, you'll see that I have a Vagrant file in there. If you're familiar with Docker and Docker files, this is kind of the same idea. There's just a flat file that provides all the configuration information about what is needed by the tool, I guess. There's a lot of information here. We'll go over it in just a second. We'll go back to the root folder. This is where we're going to bust open the terminal. Let's go ahead and make a directory called Vagrant Video, and we'll cd in there. Now to get started with Vagrant, you just do Vagrant init, and it says here a Vagrant file has been placed into this directory. Let's go ahead and open this guy up. And where does it say? There it is. Okay, let's move from over here. Notice how it says Ruby. So this is actually Ruby code. It's kind of it provides kind of a nice DSL, but you don't need to know Ruby to. It's not doing any sort of programming. It's just providing sort of a wrapper on top of a DSL. So right now the only thing we're going to worry about is this line here, config vmbox base. Base, I don't think it actually means anything. I guess it might spin up just an empty box, but we're going to change this to the name of a box we want to download. So let's just go ahead and pull down Ubuntu 16.04, and we're literally going to paste that in there. Now we want to go ahead and spin up that box. Vagrant up, and Vagrant is going to see that we don't have a box or any other configuration under that name, so it's going to import it, and it's actually going to pull that image down from the atlas, and it's going to install it. It's going to automate the entire thing. We can actually switch over here to VirtualBox, and you can see I didn't do any editing, by the way. Like I didn't edit any of this out. I didn't do any cuts or anything. This is all totally real time. You can see how fast this is. So it's doing all the provisioning. It's using SSH to get in there and set everything up behind the scenes. And there we go. So by default, the password, username and password is Vagrant. And there you go. Update and sudo apt upgrade. Just like that. So that took, I don't know, maybe 60 seconds total to, I mean, now granted, I have unbelievably fast internet. So there is a latency time of pulling the image down from the HashiCorp Vagrant index, and that is kind of like I said, my internet is ridiculously fast, so that's why you didn't really notice that. And the image is very small. It's an Ubuntu minimal server, which is not even 600 megabytes. But the point is that if the image was in that folder, for example, then Vagrant would have looked in that folder and just used the image there. But since it was not, this particular setup pulled it down from the cloud. But anyways, you get the idea. It took less than 60 seconds to spin up a development environment and for me to log in. So at this point, this is where you would do your updates. You would create your users and get everything else set up. You can also automate that by plugging in shell scripts. It talks about some of that here. It talks about how to set up the memory and stuff like that. It's using all the defaults. So we've got 512 megabytes and very little video memory, and I think maybe a processor, possibly two, but you can set that all up during provisioning. So while this is going, if I could have that back. Oh, it's in here. Yeah. So the next step is to export this and create an actual image of this box so that we can use it as a base image later. So a use case for this would be you pull down a base image like this one, and let's say that you're using this as your development environment. So you're going to want maybe a UI like XFCE or an IDE or something like that. So now that we have a base image, what we would do is we would go ahead and install everything we want, and then we would use Vagrant to export this image out and save it for later. That way we can integrate it into some sort of continuous integration or continuous delivery cycle, make sure that each Vagrant image is an identical copy of the others. That way when developers are using this image, the development experience stays consistent across environments. That way you can avoid developers saying, Well, I was working on it over here and it worked fine, and I gave it to this guy and it broke. Well, it turned out he had different libraries, or he was doing something different on his machine and changed a couple things. Everybody's development environment is the exact same, so you eliminate the inconsistencies. All right, so this just finished up, so let's go ahead and quit out of this. I probably should have shut down from inside the actual machine, but I guess that's okay. Now, as you can see from the background there, we're going to use Vagrant, package, base, and the name of the VM, which is Vagrant Video Default with the huge GUID, so I'm going to actually need to pull that. And we copy it here. And now we're packaging up our virtual machine so that we can use it later. And I think that'll wrap up this video. If you're just an end user or a desktop user and you never really intend on getting into software engineering, you'll probably never use this. But hey, it was fun making a video about it, and I hope that you learned something. So, thanks for watching.